Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, February 21st, I think. Man, I'm telling you, these days are just all merging together. It is the 21st. We're going to hear mapping the food landscape using healthy food walk audits to assess local food. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the Q&A box and I'll do my best to answer those. And for technical questions related to the webcast, you can, again, just type those in the Q&A box. We'll get to those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Coming up on your screen is a list of our sponsoring consortium members for 2025. So thanks to all those participating APA chapters and divisions for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today, we are sponsored by the APA Food Systems Division, and we're so happy to have you along and aboard and to hear today's session. And today's session, for those needing your AICP CM credits, it's worth 1.5 CMs, and you can log your credits by heading to planning.org, log into your My APA account, and from there you can search. Log into your My APA account, and you can search by today's title or event number, both of which can be found on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. If you are on social media, be sure to like us on Facebook. That's where I post any important date or time changes, when new sessions are available for you to register for, and of course, a weekly What's on Tap. We record all of our sessions and we post them to our YouTube channel. So head over to YouTube and type in Planning Webcast. We'll pop up along with our well over 500 session recordings, all available to you for free. So be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications when new sessions are available to register for. New this year is our subscription, our mailing subscription. So if you sign up now, either click that QR code or head over to our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and you can enter in your email address and sign up to receive, I promise, just one email a month from me letting you know what webinars are on tap for the rest of the month. So be sure to sign up if you are interested. Again, if you have any questions for our panelists, just type them in the Q&A box. To register for all of our upcoming sessions and to get all the information that you might need that you didn't hear from me here, head over to our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. All right, that is it for my intro and housekeeping items. Ariel, do you want to take it from here and kick things off?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ariel Lofton. I'm a member of the executive board of the APA Food Systems Division, and we're really excited to be sponsoring the webcast today. We'd also like to extend a special thank you to APA Ohio for their partnership in making this event possible. We're thrilled to have you all join us, and we'd like to give you a heads up about another upcoming opportunity. Later in the spring, we'll be hosting another webcast focusing on the critical role planners play in food systems for schools. And we encourage all of today's participants to keep an eye out for the APA Ohio webcast offerings for that registration. Finally, if you have any questions about the Food Systems Division, or you'd like to learn more about how you can get involved, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at foodsystemsplanning@gmail.com. We are so excited to introduce our speaker for today's session, Brittany Drakeford. Brittany is a passionate advocate for community-driven sustainable development, and she brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion today on mapping the food landscape using healthy food walk audits to assess local food systems. Brittany is a firm believer in faith. It's the practice of combining faith, arts, and technology to energize communities and create equitable spaces for both current and future generations. She is currently pursuing her PhD in urban and regional planning and design at the University of Maryland, College Park. And in her professional role, Brittany serves as a community planner at the National Capital Planning Commission. Additionally, as an executive team member of the Capital market, Brittany plays a key role in shaping their strategic plan, always pushing for long-term vision and progress. Her philosophy emphasizes the power of social capital, the value that relationships within different social networks can bring to our communities. And by leveraging these connections, Brittany believes that we can inspire individuals and rejuvenate neighborhoods for lasting change. So we are thrilled to have Brittany with us today to share her insights on the intersections of planning, community, and food systems. So please join me in welcoming Brittany Drakeford.
Thank you so much, Ariel. And thank you so much, Christine. Really excited about today's discussion and presentation. And also really excited to talk to everyone a little bit more about some of the research that I've been doing for school and also through my work with the capital market. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All righty. So good afternoon. And as Ariel mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit today about mapping the food landscape and using healthy food walk audits to assess local food systems. So in addition to being an urban planner, I'm also a farmer, a beekeeper, and researcher, and really proud member and resident of Prince George's County. So today, through our presentation, I'm going to do a few things. So 4 key things I'm going to do today. First, I'm just going to explain why I am interested in food systems and food-oriented development and how it intersects with my work as an urban planner and futurist. Then I'm going to define a few key terms to help contextualize what food justice is, food systems is, and how it works in this entire paradigm. Then we're going to describe the effects that we see of insufficient food access in communities. And then finally, walk through the process of using healthy food walk audits to assess community food access and overall infrastructure for healthy communities. And specifically, I'm going to explore District Heights, Maryland, as the case study example for today. So one of the most important things for me is that I am a lifelong Prince Georgian. I'm a descendant of farmers and land workers, both who were forcibly required to work the land as enslaved people, but also people who chose to grow food as a way to build community, connection, and hope for the future. I, along with my friends and family, sit on the board of an organization called the Capital Market, which is a community-led organization that features and centers food systems and leverages cultural capital to revitalize communities through education and placekeeping and placemaking. We use food systems regeneration to vision a world where all have access to healthy foods, affordable housing, and opportunities for community and self-actualization. For us, this looks like a place where history is used to guide the present and future, to sustain an environment that is safe and engaging for each community member, no matter the stage of life. A place where everyone can connect with their food systems and neighbors in a meaningful way. Our work is community-led, being that we primarily work directly with individuals, whether you live in an urban community, a rural community, or suburban community, who are impacted by a disconnected food system. So next, I think Christine is going to play a video that really helps to contextualize why we got started with the capital market in 2018 in direct response to the closure of our neighborhood grocery store.
All right, I am pulling it up now. And just interrupt if you don't hear it. I think we got it though. Let me move this over here. Okay.
I don't think the audio is working.
Not doing it again, huh? Darn it. And we even did it ahead of time. You're not hearing it, Brittany, either?
No, I'm actually not seeing it either.
Hmm.
Should I stop sharing my screen? Would that be helpful?
Yes, can you? Let's try that. Hold on one second. Let me try it one more time. Technology, right? All right, let's try it again. All right, let's see. I'm doing it one more time. Anything? No?
No, no audience.
Nothing. Ah, I'm sorry. And we did it just like Zoom told us to do it.
No worry, I'll see if I can try to do it as well. Let's see.
Yeah, give it a try. I don't know why it's not doing what it's supposed to do.
Some responses in the chat are saying when you share, you have to click and share audio.
Yeah, I did. Try it one more
Okay.
time and select that if you wouldn't mind, like when it asks you what screen you want, and it might give you that option. I tried it and it didn't work, but give it a whirl.
Yeah, that option's not working for me either. It's like grayed out. No worries. I'll give you all
I'm
the
sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, you know what? I can even I'll put the link in the chat too, so that folks can see it.
All right, sounds good. So essentially what we have is a video of the local news in NBC4 actually reporting on the impacts of the grocery store in our neighborhood closing. So it was a Safeway grocery store that closed in 2016. It was one of the few grocery stores in our community, and it closed. And so, as you can imagine, it's a very complicated matter. The grocery store closed in 2016. And we have yet to see a new grocery store come online in this community, come online in this community today. Okay. So since that time, so since the closure of the grocery store, the Capital Market, which is the organization that I serve on the board of, we have partnered with more than 70 community organizations, including the Creative Student Arts Center, federal agencies, Prince George's County Soil Conservation District, to host more than 150 pop-up food-based activations, to support a growing number of community and locally owned farms and businesses, and contributed more than 3,000 pounds of fresh produce to families experiencing food insecurity. And so our organization, as I indicated, it really centers on a community in the greater Capitol Heights community, which includes District Heights and Prince George's County. So the community has, historically has a lot of different population health issues, both being identified as a health enterprise zone by the state of Maryland, as a result of having high rates of chronic illnesses and few medical care providers. But, the community does have high rates of civic engagement, about a 60% voter turnout rate, multiple community-based organizations, and several social services networks. Additionally, the local, investment in the community has been somewhat shaky over time. The community was first developed as a segregated, suburban enclave. And today the community's design contributes to challenges in actually accessing and just moving around the community. So it lacks safe pedestrian infrastructure, and it's actually has one of the highest fatality corridors running through the community. And so as you all are thinking about, this work, and as I'm talking about mapping the food landscape in Prince George's County, I invite you all to consider and to map the food landscape in your communities as well, right? So I have a QR code, so I'll take a little bit of time if you want to pull out your mobile device or copy the web address that's listed there. to actually help me build out a landscape or a map of what your food story is in your local community. So consider for yourself, what does it look like to walk or to ride a bike to your nearest grocery store or to a local community garden? How is that dispersed and spread out in your community? So again, I'll just hold this for a few minutes if anyone, for you all to copy that down.
I put it in the chat also. I'm putting lots of links in the chats for everybody, so make sure you take a look.
All right, well, it's in the chat, so we'll keep it moving. And so as we think about, and as I think about, for the work that we do, how does land use policies and how do land use policies shape the food system? And ultimately, this is one of the biggest drivers and the biggest questions for us at the capital market, and through some of my academic research, is what is the impact of land use policies and how does it shape our ability to access food and to engage in food systems in a culturally appropriate and exciting and fun way. So first, the food systems is a socio-ecological perspective to understand how food production food distribution moves in a neighborhood, right? So often when I've talked to planners about the importance of local food systems or healthy communities, they often just go to, well, is there a grocery store, right? But a grocery store is merely one component and one aspect of the food system. The food systems encompasses a broader perspective, considering not just the food supply chain, but also the socioeconomic, environmental, and health impacts of food production and consumption. So if we think about the food system, it goes everything from actually growing, harvesting food, even who has access to land or to the facilities and infrastructure to grow food, right? What are the transportation networks that we need to distribute that food throughout a local community? Is there space for processing, for food production, for manufacturing, and all of those things? The Global Food Security Strategy looks at food system as agriculture and food systems are the intact or whole unit made up of interrelated components of people, behaviors, relationships, and material goods that interact in the production, processing, packaging, transporting, trade, marketing, consumption, and use of food, feed, and fiber through aquaculture, farming, wild fisheries, forestries, and pastoralism. The food and agriculture systems operates within and is influenced by social, political, economic, and environmental contexts. It includes everything from livable and affordable housing for farm workers, retail workers, and other laborers connected with the food system. In totality, the food system is the combination of the social, built, financial, and natural resources of our community. Anything that makes the food economy operate is part of the food system. And so when we think about that relationship between urban farmers and the food systems, land use policies, particularly zoning, have such a huge impact on it. It determines where we can grow food. It determines where and how we can process food. It determines how we can market, what kind of signs are on display, where we can sell food. Are there farmers markets? In some communities, the number of actual farmer market days are determined through our local land use policies and zoning ordinances. Even how, of course, how consumers access our products, right? How are people able to navigate their own communities to be able to get what they need from either their local grocery store or their local community garden? At the capital market, we look at the food systems and the impacts of food, what we refer to as food apartheid, through an intersectional lens, right? And so we started this organization in response to the closing of a grocery store. And so that one grocery store was the only grocery store along a 7-mile stretch of community that spanned from Benning Road in Washington, D.C., to Largo Center in Prince George's County. So this was a multi-jurisdictional challenge. And one of the foundational things that we recognized was that there's an intersection of different government policies, both at the local, state, and federal level, that relate to housing, trade, transportation, zoning, employment, and even taxes that determine how different communities access healthy foods, right? Both physically access them, but also is there even a prevalence or availability of the food in the community? And then also foods that are culturally relevant to them. So in response to these challenges, that's how we developed and designed our organization. And so through that, we advance a concept that we refer to as food-oriented development, as a development strategy to use food and to center food and agriculture to create economic opportunities, healthy neighborhoods, and explicitly build community assets and pride with individuals who have been impacted by insufficient food access in their communities. One of the key things that I always like to note about some of the differences between, let's say, food-oriented development and transportation-oriented development is that where transportation-oriented development focuses on transportation and using that as a tool to create opportunities to destinations outside of the community, or to even, of course, build up community around those transit stations. We at the capital market posit that food can be used to create destinations and opportunities within the community itself. Essentially, the question that we ask and that the question that we're constantly trying to drive is how do we get back to primary and secondary industries while ensuring that local community members have ownership over those industries in their neighborhood? Again, this looks at livable and affordable housing, still ensuring multimodal transportation networks. Are there community and cultural spaces? What do the economic and educational opportunities look like for residents and people who live in a space? And what are the impacts of the ecological and natural resources as well? So for us, food systems and raw production are integral to community development, serving as the foundation of economic growth. And so what you all see in this picture here, I know you're probably like, what's going on, right? And so what you see is one of my friends, Xavier Brown, who's a farmer, educator, and founder of an organization called Soulful City. So he's holding a piece of dyed fabric. You can also see that Xavier's hands are indigo dyed, right? But what you can't see is that over the last 2 years, Xavier has been growing cotton and indigo in the DC area. And he has been processing the cotton to make fabric and thread, and also processing the indigo to make dye. And so once he perfects this process, he'll then work with local farmers and farming cooperatives to scale up this process of growing cotton and indigo, particularly again working with local farming cooperatives to start to manufacture and create ideally denim or other materials that can be used to again advance that primary and secondary industries that I discussed earlier. So then how does food injustice impact our community, right? So talked a little bit about what the food landscape is. Now let's talk about how it impacts our community. So in Prince George's County, it impacts it greatly, right? So Prince George's County was one of the largest agricultural counties in the state of Maryland. But now we face significant food insecurity challenges. Nearly 1 in 2 Prince Georgians experience some form of food insecurity, making it a key area of concern in a region where more than 1 in 3 people, nearly 1.5 million people, didn't always know where their next meal would come from, right? And this is through the Capital Area Food Bank's 2024 Hunger Report. What we also see is that rising transportation costs that disrupt the food supply chain. We see a 2.5 increase cost from 2024, from January 24 to December 24, which builds upon a 13.5% increase in food prices from September 2021 to August 2022. All right, so we see directly an impact of just food costs, which again makes food insecurity more challenging. In a 2013 report by the Economic Research Services of USDA, they determined that fuel prices are a statistically significant factor in determining the difference between domestic, wholesale, and farm level produce prices. For produce shipped by truck, these price margins are increasingly sensitive to fuel prices as the distance traveled from the growing source lengthens, right? So basically the more fuel miles or the more miles your food travels, the likelihood that food would be more expensive. which is again why we try to advocate for local food systems and local food productions. But ultimately, the most important result that we see in Prince George's County, and of course counties throughout the country, is that the impact of high prices of food or food insecurity ultimately results in shortened life expectancy and disparate life expectancies in specific communities. And that is basically due to different types of accessibility and availability that people have to their health. So if we look in Prince George's County, so we have two communities, right? So we have a community that's Suitland. The Suitland community experiences high rates of food insecurity, as well as other environmental challenges that make accessing food a challenge, a difficult. And so they have an average life expectancy in that community of 70 years. And that is about 16 years shorter than the average life expectancy for Prince George's County residents who live in communities like Greenbelt, which, as implied in the name, has a little bit more availability of food and also has an urban design pattern that supports that. And shortened lives lived doesn't just impact individuals, it also impacts families and communities. So imagine what types of cultural or farming knowledge could be transitioned to someone in that 16 years of life that is now truncated as a result of the built environment and overall urban design of a community. And so what conditions make accessing healthy foods different in Prince George's County? And this was the driving question of the research that really led us to develop and implement the healthy food walk audits. At the time, this was early 2020, I was working as the leader of a community garden in an area closer to Greenbelt, which has an urban design pattern more typical of Washington, D.C. or a traditional streetcar suburb, right? There were smaller lots. It was very walkable. There were a lot of sidewalks. We were closer in proximity to the University of Maryland, which is an economic driver in the state. So of course, it's also an economic driver in the county. It was more racially diverse, and the physical environment, both the built and natural environment, seems to be more conducive to supporting urban farms, community gardens. And when I would go to communities like Capitol Heights or Sea Pleasant, District Heights, communities that we identify as more southern or central Prince George's County, we started to notice lots of challenges around urban design. We also started to see that there was significant investments being made in community gardens and urban farms, but something was happening where maybe those urban farms or community gardens, there was lots of interest, people were excited about it, and then 6 months later, support started dwindling. And so we said, okay, what is actually happening in this community that is making it such that people who are interested in growing food and started to organize to grow food now are no longer doing that? So what's actually happening in the community? And so that was basically how we started this, right? We wanted to seek and gain a better understanding of what challenges face existing community gardeners and what they needed to rebuild or reprogram sites that are already in establishment. So at the Capital Market, we use 4 general strategies to advance healthy food access. First, connecting with impacted people through community discussions to understand their experiences, using community-led research to assess community conditions with impacted individuals and other stakeholders, actually sharing those findings and prioritizing recommendations with impacted people, right? To determine what their capacity is, maybe to start implementing some of those recommendations, and also explore possibilities for the future. And then using and equipping people with the skills or with resources to advance their own goals of sustainability, health, economic resilience, and cultural celebration. And then finally, just as a bonus, we use joy as well to sustain energy and help people actually transition from states of hopelessness or states of nihilism or skepticism to actually start to believe in a changed future, and that a changed future is possible. And so through our work, we use a variety of different programs, including civic leadership programs, a farmer's market, and food business incubator spaces. And the most important thing, which I know y'all are like, all right, when is she going to get to it, is using healthy food walk audits. And so we use healthy food walk audits really as a concept of like place as pedagogy and place is a space, right? For us to be able to support residents with understanding how their local neighborhoods impact their decisions and how their local neighborhoods design impacts their decisions and their overall health. And then using this as a tool to allow them to be able to make recommendations to their elected officials and decision makers. And so we've done this process with a variety of different groups, including youth groups who conduct these healthy food walk audits to collect information about sidewalk conditions, air quality, transportation options as well. And so a healthy food walk audit is almost identical to your traditional walk audit if you're familiar with that, right? So we go out with a clipboard and with a series of questions, we interview people, we do those different things, right? Walking audits for us, we want to make sure that we're collecting both quantitative data, so numbers, as well as qualitative data, the stories on the walking environment and of the overall community experience. Information collected during our walk audits, as I mentioned, can include a variety of different factors. I always encourage people to use all of their senses. What do you smell? What do you touch? What do you see? What can you taste, right? What do you feel? What do you hear? Because all of that is critical for our experience. And when we're conducting healthy food walk audits, specifically, we're looking at it through a lens specifically of walking or biking from one community site or food outlet, such as a garden, grocery store, restaurant, whatever, to another. And this is the primary difference of maybe just a traditional walk audit, is that we are acutely aware of a person or community's experience traveling to different food locations. So, you know, the prompt that I typically give people or that I would give to someone is, imagine you are a parent or imagine you are a senior in the community. You're taking public transportation, or you're no longer driving, and you have to get food for yourself or for your family. It's raining outside or it's really hot. What is your experience like navigating back and forth, carrying all of the different food and resources that you need for the day or week? And for us at the Capital Market, we break out our healthy food walk audits in three components. The first is the community conversation. The second is the actual walk audit assessment. And then we conclude with evaluation, feedback, and recommendations. And so again, I mentioned that I was going to use the city of District Heights as our case study example to actually walk you all through how we conducted healthy food walk audits with the Capital Market. So I'm going to just provide a little bit more context of where and what District Heights is. So District Heights is about 2 miles from Washington, D.C. It was initially settled as farmland owned by Major Leander Williams. And the District Heights company purchased and subdivided several hundred acres of land to establish the new community. District Heights was specifically developed and marketed as a neighborhood for federal government employees working in the nearby nation's capital. At the time of its development, there was a housing crisis in Washington, D.C. There was limited land in the district and high home values in neighboring counties. Today, the neighborhood consists of primarily African-American residents, with an increasing number of Hispanic and Latino residents living in the neighborhood as well. Geographically, the city is about 550 acres with several small creeks flowing through the neighborhood, including the northwest branch and western branch of the Patuxent River, which all flow into the Chesapeake Bay. There are waterways that are in the neighborhood that were channelized, likely to support stormwater management and flood mitigation efforts in the city. While the majority of the neighborhood is zoned for single-family residential, there are a few small pockets of multifamily and commercial zoning in the city. And that for us was really key to note, because that also then adds to some of the challenges of food availability in the neighborhood as well. So one of the first things that we did, again, as I mentioned, for conducting our healthy food walk audits, is conducting these community conversations. And the purpose of conducting the community conversations was to develop a shared language for healthy food terms. right? As planners, sometimes we go into the community, right? We have our own definition, we're using terms, and some of those terms do not resonate at all with community members. They're like, what are you talking about, right? Or they might instinctively have an idea of what's happening in their neighborhood, but because we're using different language, as planners, we might not be able to truly capture and understand what someone is trying to say just because there is a jargon difference, right? So what we did through our healthy food walk audits, we facilitated about 4 different healthy food community conversations to discuss that language. So we started first by distributing surveys at our weekly farmers markets. We got about 70 surveys completed with respondents providing feedback about several topics, including transportation safety, what public amenities were available, and recreational opportunities in the community. The surveys really encouraged participants to define healthy foods and share whether they believed that they had sufficient and safe access to healthy foods in their community. From there, we conducted community conversations. We held, as I mentioned, about 4 community conversations. Using that survey data, our team drafted some proposed definitions, and then we represented them to the community to see if they basically how they measured up. We shared these draft definitions during our community conversation, and we actually tested them during our walk audits, and then we basically continue to revise them as we go through each iteration of our walk audits. So the overall definition that we came up with for healthy foods include that healthy foods are foods that are nutrient rich, could be fresh, local, ideally locally grown. It could be prepared foods or foods that are minimally processed, because we recognize that everyone doesn't necessarily have a lot of time to cook food from scratch, but prepared foods that are minimally processed also support as healthy foods. Of course, it includes fruits, vegetables, grains, and veggies, nuts or lean meats. And there was a big emphasis on foods that were not processed. And overall, the food is beneficial for physical and emotional health. From there, we also developed a definition or a shared definition of healthy food access. What we came up with was a safe way for people to reach whole foods. This includes foods, the ability to navigate and retrieve affordable, nutrient-rich, natural, locally grown fresh fruits, vegetables, grains, and lean protein or prepared foods that are minimally processed within 15 minutes of one's home, either by walking, biking, using public transportation, or an alternative non-car mode of transportation. Healthy food access considers the route an individual takes to navigate the neighborhood to retrieve these resources, and it should be visually interesting, has working social and physical infrastructure that makes users feel safe, including but not limited to street lights, designated protected pathways, trails, separating cars and other forms of transportation, a presence of people who bring comfort, whether those are police officers or neighbors, and mechanisms to hold people accountable for when harm is done. Ideally, the destination where healthy foods are located should be diverse and can include grocery stores, farmers market, corner stores, or other spaces for exchange. Healthy food access also considers opportunities for community connections, considers access and control of land, appreciation of diversity, and includes aspects of shared trust and communications. So that was a shared definition of healthy food access that we developed. We also looked at the idea of food justice and really centering on components of healthy, sustainable, and that food was a human right, that there are issues of structural barriers that prevent people from accessing food, and really centering community participation and individual agency in making food decisions that are critical for them. So in total, our next step was to actually conduct the walk audits. So in total, we conducted about 9 walk audits in Prince George's County, with doing about 5 specifically in District Heights. The walk audits, as I mentioned, included areas where there have been some investment in and some designed in community gardening program, but lack some sort of social infrastructure to keep them going. We use the insights from the community conversations to develop the walking routes that basically mimic community members' walking and biking experience to travel to places where either they currently travel to access food or where they might desire to travel in the future. So of those 5 community walk audits that we led in District Heights, we focused on spaces that included growing spaces, vacant buildings, community food distribution sites. So it was their food bank or emergency food center, farmers market locations, the local library, city hall, senior housing, apartment complexes, the town's commercial corridor, K through 12 schools, and as well. We also prepped community members on how to conduct a healthy food walk audit safely, and looking at everything from ensuring that they were communicating safely with people about who they were, what their names are, and just how do you remain safe and unbiased throughout the process. So this is actually a visual display of the 5 walking routes that we conducted in the city of District Heights. Each of the routes were about a mile long, and it would take us maybe about an hour and a half to 2 hours to fully walk the route. So again, this is an example of what one of the routes looked like. So we started at City Hall, then we went to a local church, which is where there's an emergency food distribution center, and then also to a local grocery store. And so we then assess every single component. Alrighty. So then we also had sample audit questions. And so these are just presenting some of the different questions that we asked asked ourselves as we were assessing the neighborhood. And then some of the questions we also then found community members to ask them as well. And so these questions look at what are the scents that you smell in the neighborhood? Do any of them bother you or excite you? How many fast food restaurants or carry out restaurants or quick service restaurants are there? How do you compare that to grocery stores or healthy food growing spaces? Are there many tobacco shops, smoke shops, or liquor stores? Is that something that you also see in the community? Are there any barriers that make accessing healthy foods or make walking or biking difficult? Right? Are there poles or shrubs in the sidewalk? Right? That often happens. Are there insufficient trash can? Are there poles that might be or wires that might be hanging down? So for instance, when we conducted our healthy food walk audit, we noticed that the street signals were not working properly. So if we wanted to cross the street, we might, instead of actually getting a signal to walk, we would get an error that said error not working, right? And so for community members who are trying to safely navigate their neighborhoods in areas where there are high rates of pedestrian fatalities, just to get healthy foods, that makes it very difficult or more challenging. Okay. All right. And so then the third component of this work was then to actually provide recommendations. And these, again, are community-led recommendations to enhance the local food system and to make revisions to the built environment, and also consider social programs that can be done to make the neighborhood and to improve the overall food landscape in the community. So some of the things that we identified through the healthy food walk audits were, of course, just challenges with walkability and connectivity, and those being pervasive throughout the community. The community, in many instances, and what we've seen in the neighborhoods where we've worked, street infrastructure, such as furniture or lighting, is missing. And in other instances, maybe there are few sidewalks as well. And so without that basic form of infrastructure, it makes it extremely challenging for neighborhoods for community members to navigate or just to navigate their neighborhood. In other instances, there was a need to maintain and just to invest to improve safety and comfort for pedestrians, as well as for cyclists as well. In this particular community, we saw green, open spaces, trees, and waterways that were abundant and could be great opportunities to support and complement food investments, such as community gardens, farms, markets, or gathering places. In the image on the far left, right, this is the community's greenway, where they also see high rates of flooding. And we said this could be a perfect space to incorporate food forests or finding ways to use edible vegetation to support and to reduce impacts of stormwater runoff. Finally, something that we saw that community members sometimes, or residents and maybe even elected officials took for granted, was just the prevalence of locally owned and operated businesses that could be used to develop new programming around healthy foods. So this looked at everything like where the local electricians were, are there local printers, were there corner stores or tobacco shops that there could be an opportunity to maybe infuse some healthier foods into their produce selection. But basically what we said was, or identified, was that there are a lot more opportunities to increase food access or to increase the overall systems to support food production by using some of these different businesses that were already prevalent in the community. And then also, as I mentioned, looking at things like tree canopy coverage offer benefits for food production and increasing healthy food access, both to help regulate microclimates and improve soil health, because trees help to advance crop yields and sustainability, while also providing habitats for pollinators and pest controlling wildlife, reducing the need for chemicals. And so what we see here, again, looking at these different images on this slide, right, we can see some of the conditions of the roadway, right? We have a bus stop, the bus stop lacks actual shelter for people. So there is the bus stop lacks shelter, so there's not a place to sit down if you're waiting for the bus. It makes it more difficult for you to navigate the community. So some key recommendations that we made to really support the city in advancing using healthy food walk audits to advance the local food landscape. First looked at prioritizing capital investments and other improvements to existing infrastructure, such as pedestrian signaling, sidewalks, vegetation management, while also just ensuring that they were adequately maintained. In Prince George's County, right? And so the entire purpose of our healthy food walk audits are also both to understand and access the current conditions of the built environment, while also navigating and helping elected officials and decision makers understand just the political and policy landscape of the community as well. So in Prince George's County, for example, the municipalities, so our smaller municipalities, do not have planning and zoning authority. That authority is relegated to the county or to a quasi-county government agency. As a result, there were some zoning or some permitting things that the community could not do, right? So we tried to identify solutions looking at things such as social media campaigns, letter writing campaigns, to help to advance this. We also encourage the community to develop a healthy food retail program to incentivize and promote healthy food retail establishments within their city limits. So we noted high rates of vacancy or empty commercial facilities and facilities that have been chronically vacant. So those for us served as opportunities for the city to either generate a small fund to support local farmers or food producers like Xavier. Maybe he can turn a vacant CVS or a vacant convenience store into an indoor growing facility. where he could grow cotton, indigo, or at least manufacture that for some other product. Again, activating those chronically vacant facilities and identifying potential commercial districts to target policy incentives and development that support grocers, markets, and restaurants. And as we said, using some of those definitions of healthy food and healthy food access, these should be within a 15-minute walk from high density housing developments and located in close coordination with major metro and bus connections. And also given the increasing number of and availability of multilingual residents in the area, how do we increase the availability of interpretation, both through wayfinding signage, other materials, and programming in multiple languages, including Spanish, to help support all residents in the community, navigate their local community for food. So next, I'm going to just transition to our actual story map. So the final component of our work is, of course, producing some type of document or deliverable that can be accessed by our community members who participate in the walk audit in a way that is makes the information accessible and easy for them, while also making it easier to share with their elected officials. So this is the story map. If you want to just scan the QR code, and then I will also just walk through it as well on the computer. All right, so this is our walk audit story map that we developed for the city of District Heights, that we use with them, and that they have been using to share out as well with some of their findings. And the city has used this research that we prepared for them, basically as a key component of their sustainability efforts and sustainability initiatives, and also economic initiatives in the community as well. So of course, we include lots of graphics and images as part of this work. And then I'll walk you all through some of the, just some of the mapping. And then let me drop this in the chat as well. So we started this, of course, with a historical analysis and historical review of the community's history, and really its long-term connection with food. As we conducted the Healthy Food Walk audit, we talked to residents who spoke very fondly about fruit trees and orchards that were first in the community when they moved in, that over time had been depleted or were no longer there. So we also saw using some of the food recommendations that we made, particularly the food forest, as an opportunity to enhance the community's heritage and the history of the community, as well as also advancing healthy food access. So this is an example of some of the channelized natural features in the community, where they do see flooding, and that we also see as opportunities. So there are other farmers that we've worked with in the DC metro area who grow rice. I'm not saying that this is necessarily the best location to grow rice, but there are opportunities because rice is a very water intensive crop. Also an opportunity to think about different crops, particularly around food, and how that can be integrated more naturally into the built environment. This just walks through the process of the Healthy Food Walk audit for community members. And so you can see all of our participants, we always ensured that they had safety vests on while they were walking. They had their clipboards. Interestingly, as they walked the community, just to talk about the nature of community ownership, as they walked throughout the community, they also were, as part of the Healthy Food Walk audit, conducted interviews with community members and businesses. So in some instances, they would go into businesses, and when you see someone who has a clipboard and a safety vest on, you may not know who they are, right? And you might have an idea that maybe they're a permit officer. So what community members reported was that when they would go into certain establishments, that maybe before conducting the healthy food walk audit, they may not have had the best interaction or best relationship with the business owner. Maybe certain things weren't kept up or managed well. But when they will walk into the facility with a clipboard and a safety vest on, the business owners or business representatives in some of the retail spaces would immediately start to clean up areas that they may have neglected. And this was because they actually thought that they were permit officers who were coming into the facility, right? And so for them, it was something that was really interesting for them to see and to observe, community members to see and observe just around like the nature of power and decision making. Again, we post the actual walk route maps for community members. So if they're interested in going back and looking at it themselves, we do our great picture beforehand. We list out our key findings, including some of the different images of what we saw, and then providing a list of different recommendations. Something that I did not include earlier was actually our assessment of impervious surfaces and green spaces in the community, and how we could use that again to leverage opportunity for creating additional growing spaces in the neighborhood. This is an image of the part of the walking route. So this is a direction, actually, I believe from the local library over to a more commercial section of the community, right? So this is for community members, right? If you're coming from the library, this looks like it may not be the best place to cross the street, but it is the easiest direction. And so that's why we also focus very heavily on pedestrian access, pedestrian routes, and what types of recommendations could be used to increase an individual's overall walking experience. This is them actually interviewing, some of our participants interviewing a business owner in the community. And an example of one of our farmers markets with the capital market. So then just again, to walk through some of the recommendations that we made, right? So these are opportunities for maybe creating healthy food districts or finding ways to use local funds combined with state and federal incentives to activate for more healthy food opportunities through businesses, innovative and creative ways to slow down traffic or to make crosswalks more prominent and prevalent, just overall maintaining them, as well as mapping different pop-up farmers market locations near senior centers or active community spaces as well. And then we included a few case study examples about other practices that we see across the country. This is an example of peddling fruits and vegetables, which is a program that happens out in the Central Valley community in California. We also mapped in opportunities for local food production for the community, looking at, of course, elementary schools, the greenway that I mentioned earlier, senior centers, and then other vacant spaces as well. And then with just next steps and references to support them. Okay. So with that, I want to also just acknowledge our team to implement this project. We had a pretty fun team of people, including some researchers from the University of Maryland, my graduate students who were at the University of Maryland, as well as the Neighborhood Design Center in the city of District Heights. So with that, I thank you all so much for walking with me today through building and mapping mapping the food landscape and how we can use healthy food walk audits. And I know I wanted to make sure we save lots of time for questions. And as we're doing questions, I'm going to go back to see if anybody filled out their, where the local food spaces were in their community, and try to pull those up so that we can look at that map together. Thank you.
Brittany, there are so many questions. Let's dive in, shall we? First one is right off the bat. Can you explain how you see your role as a futurist as distinct from a planner? And when you mentioned future, like when I heard futurist, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Talk more about that, please.
Yeah, so I think my role as a futurist distinguishes itself from a planner. All right, so I don't want to get too deep right now, but
I mean, we're there already. Just
okay.
do it. Just let it happen.
All right. So I think as urban planners, right, we often think about space and we think about place, right? But one thing that, for me, the thing that distinguishes my ability or me from a futurist to a planner is remembering that as we are, one, planning is just thinking about the future. For me, the futurist is how do we actually help shape it and what are we actually doing to make it happen? Then, from a time bound perspective, if we are thinking about the future, planning for the future, and actually coordinating for that future to happen, in the future, this is like where the little wonky part gets, right? We will also have shaped the past, right? So as a futurist, I'm also thinking about not just what the future looks like, but what is the past that we're also protecting, holding, and keeping, and how are we shaping that, right? So, sitting in this time, in this moment, right? I have the ability, and through the work that we're doing, looking at food, and I think food presents a really great example of this, right? If I plant a tomato, if I plant a eggplant, right, we're getting seeds back, right? After that plant grows, after it, makes its production, and I've enjoyed the bounty, there's still seeds that are left that I can then go back and plant and then see something else create. So for me, that's what the big difference is, right? Is thinking about the future, but also having a consideration of how this future that I'm actively working to develop and implement will shape the futures of others and also ultimately shape the past.
I love that. So while we're on this kick, can you talk more specifically about how you use joy to help with community work?
Yeah. All right. So I have a joke that I'm a cynical planner, and all the students who take my my community development course at Maryland know this, right? And so often as planners, right, it's a lot of fun work that we do, but sometimes, right, we're not always the ultimate decision makers, right? We have to maybe convince our local county. We got to convince the elected officials. Sometimes we might have to convince our supervisors. In communities that have been historically under-resourced or that have been historically marginalized, sometimes, as I mentioned, there's a sense of nihilism, right? This can't happen. This can't work. And so how do you actually transition people and help people think that there is a better possibility? And if individuals don't believe that there's a better possibility for the future, then they're not going to actually get involved and get engaged because they're going to feel like, well, we did this before, it didn't work. We did this before, it didn't work. And so our role at the capital market is, I'll say my sister calls herself the chief officer of vibes and creating good vibes for all. But our work then is to consider how do we actually use joy and create experiences and opportunities for people who sometimes are dealing with situations that make them not joyful or that can seem frustrating, depressing. It can seem like it's just a constant same thing after another. How do we create experiences to make that enjoyable? So I'll give you an example. We do a pop-up farmers market at Creative Student Art Center. One Sunday we had the good vibes going, we had the music going, and it was a very interesting weekend. The Saturday before, there was a pedestrian who was hit by a car right in front of where our farmers market was. About 30 minutes before the farmers market was to open, a block down the street, there was a shooting and an individual was killed. If you're living in an environment like that, things don't seem joyful, right? So then to have an experience about an hour and a half, 2 hours later of seeing a young child play and laugh with bubbles running around at a farmer's market completely changes the energy. Similar to another farmer's market we hosted, where the day before, There was a shooting at a metro station. It was an unfortunate situation. Thankfully, no one was injured fatally. But for people who were coming out of that metro station the next day to hear music, to see fresh fruits and vegetables, and people welcoming them and enjoying them and creating a celebration for them as they came home from work was a radical difference. And so that's kind of how we try to incorporate joy into our work.
Well, it makes sense now. So yes, thank you. Let's talk about farmers markets specifically for a moment. There's a couple questions just trying to align the total value of this. And are markets more expensive than going to a grocery store? And can it be difficult for people to get to a local market on foot and walk home with all of their things? What if you're living near me and it's perpetual winter? Which I'm not complaining, but I probably will in 2 weeks. So can we address some of that as it relates to markets like that?
Yeah, so I mean, at the capital market, we don't believe that farmers markets are the only solution for communities that are experiencing, right, that lack food access. It's part of that, but it's not the only thing, right? And so we look at a very integrated model at the capital market. So one of the things that we do, anyone who is receiving SNAP or WIC or any kind of food assistance, we actually doubled their dollars. So we've had people at our markets. We work with farmers who sell cattle, who sell beef, who sell pork, who sell eggs, bread, all that. So if you come to the market and you spend $100, we'll give you another $100 to spend to help that dollar go even further. So that's like one thing that we try to do and that we really build into our model as an organization. What we've also have been doing, we've partnered in the past with other community-based organizations. I'm particularly thinking about faith-based institutions who already have certain types of infrastructure in the community, right? So where we host farmers markets at events that they're already doing, where they might already be providing transportation, or, right, these are faith-based institutions. I'll say in Prince George's County has has the highest concentration and highest density of mega churches in the country, right? So these are organizations with lots of infrastructure. They have a fleet of vans. And so we have worked with the churches to actually help bring out vehicles to move people around for different events and activations. We also, so I think that's a component of the transportation aspect. We've also worked with other organizations, and I'll, it's an organization called the People's Market. We have a refrigerated van with the Capital Market where we're also able to do deliveries and move things around through that way. And then finally, I think the most important process that we do with the Capital Market, after every market, we try to, any produce that is unsold from a local farmer, we actually purchase that produce back from that farmer so that the farmer is not going without a loss. And then we work with local food pantries to then get those fresh fruits and vegetables basically infused to their already existing distribution networks. So if a emergency food bank already works with senior citizens, right? This day, they're going to get whatever we have left over from the market, and then they're able to then just incorporate that into their already existing distribution channel. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know if I left something out. But, yeah.
Can you address food swamps so essentially row after row of convenience store, and how that might have a disproportionate impact on health outcomes, what planners can do about it? I think there's kind of a balance. Some food is better than no food, right? But at the same time, is there a way to determine where these food swamps are and where we might be able to bring in fresh food?
Yeah. So in Prince George's County, one of the things that we did, Prince George's County developed what they call healthy food priority areas. And those were basically areas where they looked at both the availability of fresh fruits and vegetables through full service grocery stores in comparison to the number of fast service or quick food restaurants, or basically high caloric restaurants, right? And so they were able, that was one way that they were able just to identify them, right? So where are communities where we might have greater numbers of quick service restaurants or quick service establishments compared to grocery stores? So, you know, what can we do as planners? I mean, that's a very tricky thing. Also, forgive me if you hear my dog pig. um, it is a very, you know, it's a very tricky thing as planners, right? In some communities, so I worked for Prince George's County Planning Department on our zoning ordinance update. Some things that we did was look at, are there drive-throughs, right? Is there a way to, if not, because we can't necessarily say we don't want this store to be here, we don't want that store to be here, but we can look at what can we do to make the overall community design more available and make the community design more accessible. Some other things that I've seen and that I would love to see happen, right? Just as we look at affordable housing as part of our zoning ordinance or as part of the planning program, how do we also include affordable commercial space for locally owned and operated establishments? One of the things that we did while I was working for Prince George's County Planning Department, we actually first just permitted farming by right in every zone, right? That's the first thing, right? Are you even allowing food production to happen? From there, we even looked at, well, what does indoor growing look like, right? How do we incorporate indoor growing as an opportunity? Incorporate indoor growing as an opportunity to convert vacant spaces. We did a research effort, again, working with students at the University of Maryland, that looked at converting a former convenience store into a indoor growing facility and teaching farm that would actually generate a profit in year one, right? So I think those are some other opportunities of things that that planners can do. And then also just looking at maybe some of the programmatic elements as well, right? How do we look at, or how do we use locally owned and operated businesses, right? So a major corporation fast food restaurant may not actually be very flexible with you to make adjustments to their menu offering. But if you have a local corner store, a local carryout, there may be more opportunity in that. And we actually see higher amounts of opportunity to work with them to think about facade improvement, to think about food offering, to think about equipment changes, to actually then be able to support what we want to see in that particular area.
And if you need, like, I'm just going to keep going with questions until you say, Chris, I need a minute just to collect myself here. So let's talk for a moment about urban farming and getting fresh foods from urban farming. There were several questions related to the health of soil and the location of farming. So, you know, you said the first thing that you did at Prince George's County, every district allowed for this. But how can we be sure that there aren't environmental contaminants or things already in the soil? So like, was that, I'm sure it was thought about. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do with the capital market, we actually have partnered with CDC and asked our to do a program that they have called Soil Shop, which is actually like a we did that in 23 or 24, where actually community members can come out. We would host it at our farmers markets, and community members could come out, bring a sample of their soil, and it would be tested on site for lead and other types of contaminants. They would then get a report, figure out what they need to do to remediate their soil to then proceed with actually growing. In our county, as I imagine many counties have, there will likely be an organization that's a soil conservation district or local farm bureau or farm organization that will also then work with you to think about all of those things, right? Have you tested your soil? Is it better to grow in ground, or should you use some type of like a growing bed or other growing mechanism as well? But testing the soil health is like critically important. And if you're not going to test, I always just encourage people to get raised beds and then just to install your own, soil from there.
Great. I'm going to save that question for last. I like to save the big ones for last. Let's see. So, did you determine why community gardens lose interest after 6 months?
Yeah, so I mean, our hypothesis going into it was basically that it was suburban sprawl, right? So in the northern part of the county, what we saw was that the community was more walkable, right? The grocery stores, the community gardens were in closer proximity to existing residential, right? And it was physically easier for people to get there. And what we saw in other communities, or in the communities that we were looking at, the distance to get to the walking spaces were more challenging. And there were also perceptions of safety, right? So if you're at a community garden by yourself on a street where there are high rates of where people are driving very fast, the noise is loud, or there's not enough street lighting, you're not going to feel comfortable going out there to grow food or to tend to your garden by yourself. And so that was one of the major things that we saw. Also, we also noted that there were just some overall impacts with the social infrastructure, right? So Prince George's County, again, is about 500 square mile community, 27 municipalities. And then what we saw in communities where there lacked a active social infrastructure, whether it be through a municipality or a very strong civic association or homeowners association, it was more challenging to actually get community members involved and engaged because there was no system already there. So through that, we thought, well, is there an opportunity maybe to leverage what we refer to, of course, as like third spaces where people are already going, right? So could potentially faith-based institutions be a location, right? The challenges with that then also meant that maybe you had a lot of people who were going to some of these spaces, but they didn't live in the area. And to make that time commitment to go back and forth was not necessarily the easiest. So what we're really looking at now are how do we create opportunities for people to come together, really create communal spaces to help make that process easier for people.
Great. Next question. How do the Targets, Walmarts, dollar stores, and others like them that offer food factor into your audits? And the question says, I noticed one route seemed to go right by a Target.
Yeah, so we have not traditionally factored the larger big box stores into our walk routes. I think that's something that we'll probably start to do and consider more because so they do offer, they do offer food and they do have food availability and they are more convenient for some community members. But what we've heard through some of the different community conversations were that some communities didn't necessarily, I don't want to say they didn't feel like they were grocery stores, that while they felt like those were spaces where they would pick up some food items, it wasn't necessarily where they wanted to center all of their food or grocery shopping, right? And I think that was one of the major things that that came up. And I think also in that walk audit, the one that's near the Target was across the street, and we had just deemed that crossing that particular street was just at that particular location was just too physically dangerous.
Okay. So you've talked a bit in terms of partnerships about, like faith-based organizations. They already kind of have their own infrastructure. They already have a lot of things set up, kind of just built in automatically. What other groups can be tapped into? Like hospital systems. I know a lot of hospital systems tend to have a whole department just related specifically to making sure that, patients go home and have access to food. So like talk to me about that.
Yeah, so hospitals, medical centers are also like great opportunities. Most hospitals are required to do what they refer to as a community health needs assessment, which is basically assessment or inventory of the local health landscape in the community. Other hospitals have started to implement what they refer to as food as medicine programs, where they will actually provide dollars to certain clients. Basically, instead of giving them a prescription for a some type of medicine, they will give them a prescription to purchase healthy foods, right? And so we have seen that also as other great opportunities to connect with institutionally. So hospitals, medical centers, of course, libraries and schools are also other great spaces where we've seen some libraries and schools start building out community refrigeration programs where people can come, similar to like the little library, where there might be, except for their refrigerated items, in that sense as well. And that's a good question, because now I'm thinking like, what other organizations could be really interesting to work with? I'll think about that a little bit more.
And I know, like here in Ohio, at least, especially Northeast Ohio, we have about 1 million community development corporations
Yes.
that are pretty integral in that. So I guess those types of, planning adjacent groups as well.
Yeah.
What
I would,
about, oh, go ahead.
I would also add something that we're seeing, and I've studied some of this, are even utility companies. So
Explain.
one thing that we're seeing that has been of interest is a concept called agrovoltaics, where basically your traditional solar panels, where there are farmers and researchers who are actually looking at how do you grow food, basically under your traditional solar panels, right? As then an opportunity to increase food production, particularly in spaces where solar might be placed on like traditional farmlands, and basically seeing that as an opportunity to grow and advance that.
We had a webinar on that, a whole webinar on that, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. It was like, solar panels were super, super hot. And just talking about like these mega solar panel farms and ways in which, you could use it for other things. So look back on our on our YouTube page and just like Google, just go, or like in the little search bar there, and that video will come up. It was super interesting. But let's talk about money in our last like 5 minutes. How do we fund this? How are you funded? How does this happen in the wake of uncertainty right now, particularly at the federal level? Can we count on things? Tell us the good word.
Yeah, so my good word might be a bad word. No, but so we actually funded our healthy food walk audits primarily volunteer. We coordinated with local community groups. We coordinated with local community groups. We worked with the faith-based institutions, and we said, okay, well, how can we basically take what little that we have to make something big, right? And that was the way that we actually navigated through that. There were also small pots of funding to support like food, refreshments, things like that, and working with local municipalities. But I think that for some of this work, right, it will require us to think about ways in which communities organized, 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago, right? When we, 1900s, when we first started to see the development of community development and community planning to a certain extent, is to maybe hone back onto some of those ideas. So I hate to say that this is just like how do we leverage our people power to really try to advance some of this. And then again, Prince George's County, we're lucky in the sense that it has some of the highest concentration of mega churches in the country who also have interest in doing food work and advancing food work to a certain extent. And so then we say, okay, well, hey, faith-based institutions, in what way can you get involved in helping to grow some of this work as well?
So like specifically, here's one question. So how did doubling the SNAP funds? Like, where does that come from? Because that's not
Okay.
volunteer. Where do you get that from? Where's
Okay,
that money coming from?
so the double bucks dollars, so the double bucks dollars does come through in Prince George, in the state of Maryland. It's partially through the Southern Maryland Agricultural Development Corporation, right? So that is through state funding. But we have also supported it through faith-based institutions who have who might have pots of money for food distribution, right? So that's also another way that technically some of those things actually work out.
Okay. This is an interesting question. This is a good one. What about public right-of-ways, areas that are just they're owned by the public entity? Like, should we get involved? Should the municipalities be doing this work? Do you think that this is something like that volunteers could do from the community on city-owned property? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that so the challenge that often is like, who's going to maintain it, who's going to install it, who's going to construct it, and who's going to maintain it, right? I mean, so for things where it is in an existing municipality, so again, in Prince George's County, right, the municipality might have maintenance responsibility, right, but they're not necessarily responsible for constructing it or doing the initial installation, right? So I think it's really a matter of actually sitting down, mapping out the landscape, and looking at the policy landscape in that particular community as well. Who are the decision makers, and what is their interest or consideration in doing that, right? So for instance, in Prince George's County, as I know many jurisdictions probably have, we have a landscape manual that dictates what types of plants can be planted where, and what types of trees. So one thing could just be advocating that maybe we should also have fruit trees incorporated, right? And that then does not, outside of maybe like what fruit drops, right?
I was going to say anyone who's in public service right now is just dropping to the floor. If you're saying fruit trees on public right-of-ways.
No, I know. And so we faith-based institution that we work with has about 17 acres of land, and we're looking at planting fruit trees in the parking lot. And I've also heard the same I've also heard the same thing. So I know, I get it. Right. But that's one way. But then it's like, okay, well, what is the programmatic aspect that maybe you can pilot and build around that to support community members, and whether it be foraging or just, harvesting.
Second to last question. Do you have any good examples of ordinances that can ensure that like beekeeping or having a batch of fruit trees, or just, I meant we're staying away from like the whole chicken rooster conversation, but so just really just vegetation and bees, ordinances just to make sure that they're properly maintained and just for the safety of everyone around, especially if you have bees in a very urban place and just that kind of stuff. Just what are the things to think about ordinance wise?
Yeah, so the zoning ordinance update that we did in Prince George's County, I think was a great tool. I think we did a lot of really good research. We also did some lead-in research and some discussion papers on building and increasing food access in the community. So of course, I will give that a great shout out. There's I don't know if it's still in existence, but in Fort Lauderdale, there was it's like the Urban Farm Institute, which basically was a demonstration site for urban farming. And I think it's a very great example. And they provided great examples of how you could actually keep bees in an urban area. What are some ways that you could build fencing and do that. Another organization that's based in Dallas, Texas. I'm a huge stan of theirs. This is not necessarily a ordinance, but I think they have some best practice examples. It's Bonton Farms in Dallas, Texas. They basically have converted like a 2 to 3 acre lot into a urban farm, a restaurant, a farm market, and also workforce housing, which I think is a pretty cool. I think they've done some pretty cool things there. So yeah.
It's 2:30. We have to wrap up, but there's one very important question, and that is, are you on social media and LinkedIn, and where can people follow you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn. Actually, and if you scan I can drop a link with it. I can send you all a link to my LinkedIn. I have no idea what my handle is on LinkedIn, but if you
Oh,
just
it's like a number or something.
if you
Yeah.
look at Brittany Drakeford, I'm there. Also on Instagram, the capital market, we are on Instagram as well, so you can follow some of the work that we're doing on there. I believe it's just the capital market TCM 20743.
Okay.
I believe is our Instagram handle. I'm the worst.
Right? I hear you. All right. Well, folks, remember to log those CM credits. This is being recorded. We'll post it up onto our YouTube channel. Thank you. And thank you, Ariel and the Food Systems Division of APA. Make sure you check them out, and all these great resources that I stuck in the chat there. And thanks. This was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. Everyone, have a great weekend, and we'll talk next time.
Thank you so much.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.